You are now watching an agorist production by We Are Change Texas Hill Country and Truth Exposed Radio.
Thank you everyone for being here. Such a beautiful crowd, a beautiful room. It's been a long, interesting day on the road. We started at midnight in Lubbock and made it to a wonderful lunch in Waco, and I feel like I could give this speech sitting down. But I'll spare you that. Everywhere we've gone on this tour so far, we started in LA a little over a month and a half ago. It's just been an incredible experience. There's so much love and joy and beautiful community around the message of freedom. When you plant that flag, the people who come to it are the ones who are ready to hear this. But everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Hallelujah.
So the crowds in Texas, I mean, it's been, the tour keeps building and getting better and better. You know, we did Dallas, Austin, Midland, Lubbock, Waco, back here to San Antonio, and we're doing Houston on Tuesday. And I mean, I'm just overwhelmed. Everywhere we go, every event, it's like meeting a new person and getting to meet a whole group of new people. And I understand from what Gil said earlier, there are a lot of people here who he doesn't recognize. Which means that a lot of you have been breaking the first rule of Fight Club. Am I dating myself with that reference? Yeah. At this point? Dang, all right. I think it's really incredible to see how the movement is growing. And I've been doing this for a little over 7 years. Full-time activism. I started with the Iraq Veterans Against the War. For those of you who couldn't tell from the stupid look on my face, I was in the Marines. It's usually a dead giveaway. And you know, my story is one that, you know, a lot of people here are familiar with, but it's one that's really rather typical in the way that people are waking up. How many of you who have spent time considering the significance of this message, not just learning about it or being on the political side, but really appreciate it? How many of you have a sense that now we are on the right side of history? For those of you that don't, we're going to fix that in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to give you that. Because it's a really beautiful thing. And you know this already. When people wake up, they don't go back to sleep. It's not a really good analogy, waking up and being asleep, but you all know what I mean by that. When you realize a fundamental truth of human existence, and it's a really big one, by the way, you don't forget it, you don't unlearn freedom, you know, what's the difference between a statist and a libertarian? Come on, everybody.
Couple months.
About 6 months,
yep.
Right? Well, we've had to update the joke in the last several years. It's now one good weekend of watching YouTube videos and reading Wikipedia articles. Now, a lot of us get sucked into the politics of things. And by the way, the Libertarian Party was my gateway to the message. And it started in high school when they said, well, you're going to be voting in a couple years. Do you want to be a Republican or Democrat? And I was like, really? I have to be totally fucking lame? I don't have a choice? But there's got to be another option. All right. Oh, leave me alone, Libertarian? Yes. Sign me up for that. And I didn't know what it meant. And I so didn't know what it meant that I actually went and joined the Marines after identifying as such.
Can I belong to the Libertarian Party now?
I do, and when I came back from Iraq, it was the first time I could afford it. I bought a $1,000 lifetime membership in the Libertarian Party. I thought they'd never ask me for money ever again.
I got you somebody right now.
But when people go through this, like for me, that was the first step, being able to identify as a libertarian. And you know, Sam Conkin said there are 2 definitions of libertarian. Any fans of Sam Conkin here? Agorism? Excellent. Everybody who cares about this owes it to themselves to study the economic means of resisting the state, of checking out, of not contributing to the system with your economic activity. And agorism, conducting all economic affairs as if government doesn't exist, you know, living free and hoping you get away with it as much as possible, is a really important way to pull ourselves out of the system. He had two definitions of libertarian that he put out. One, anybody who calls themselves libertarian. Everybody's familiar with that, right? You know, we've got Bill Maher and Glenn Beck calling themselves libertarian. Oh, sorry. Bill Maher and Glenn Beck calling themselves libertarian. And you go, wait a second, the word's got to be kind of meaningless at that point. Second definition of libertarian, anybody who agrees with me on absolutely everything. And if you have one issue, you're not a libertarian. But there's something that I think is fundamentally at the core of how people are shifting right now, the paradigm shift that we're experiencing. And we have to step back for a minute to appreciate this as activists here, as people who get this. The functional definition I like to put forth is someone who can articulate freedom as a principle and attempt to apply it consistently. They might come to different conclusions, we all do. But there's a fundamental turning point at which you are no longer looking to the violence of the state to solve problems. And that's the critical turning point in waking up. So if that's the case, how many of us would you say there are in America? 1% would be 3.2 million.
Way too small.
I'd say we're lucky to be a third of that. As beautiful and as big as this movement may be, of people who in America can truly articulate freedom as a principle, it's a very, very small number. And part of me looks at the Libertarian Party and I go, you're trying to get elected to office? You know how elections work, right? 50 plus 1%.
The voters.
We got a long ways to go. And we got to be honest about that. It's really important to step back. Now, the Libertarian Party does amazing work. Like I said, it was my gateway to the message. It took me 10 years, though. And this is why I'm very passionate about the philosophy. Not the politics, not the political positions even, or the ideas, but really the core philosophy. Because it wasn't enough for me to say I'm a libertarian if I didn't know how to apply it, how to act like it. Because when you get this, you live differently. You can't help but live differently. And over the last several decades, we've been led astray. We've been led to thinking that this is a political movement. If the conversation of politics is who do we point the guns of government at to organize society, and our response is, no! That's not valid as an answer. You don't like someone, just point guns at them and threaten to put them in a cage? No! That is not a political answer. We're not a political movement. We're an anti-political movement. It's really important to understand that distinction because we don't act like a political movement. And if you go and behave like this is a political movement, you're going to be really frustrated. And I've been for years. It took me a long time to get to this point. It took me 4 months of a government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat, courtesy of the United States Park Police last year, to really get to this point in my own understanding. And if you go ask for someone to vote for a candidate, or to sign a petition, or to agree with you on an issue, you're going to be like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill over and over again. You take the time to win a convert to a fundamentally different way of thinking, you don't have to go back. And that's so important that we apply our principles to our activism. We be as ruthless in the analysis of our efficiency as activists as we are of the state and of economic issues. But all too many of us, myself included, I'm more guilty of this than anyone in the room, of allowing my activism to be motivated by ego. And when you get sucked into the political conversation, It becomes a zero-sum game. I'm right, you're wrong. Let's argue. Let's have a vote on it. And that's not how you win people over. All right, how many people here became libertarians because someone on Facebook started yelling at them? It doesn't happen. The conversation we should be having with the world is, hey, I found this beautiful truth that could solve all of these problems. And not only that, it's made my life better. It's made me happier. Let me share this with you. Let me show you this. Can you imagine if for the last 40 years we were doing that instead of saying, elect us? And there's a temptation, right? When you realize that at some point you start thinking differently and you go, oh crap. Am I the only one? And then you come to an event like this. And when we went to Midland, we were in Midland 2 nights ago, and everybody who showed up, there were like 20, 30 people there. I thought I was the only activist in Midland. And now there's a community there. And if we go out with this message as a positive, and I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I see a few people maybe a little confused about what I'm getting at here. When you first start paying attention to what's going on in the world, you cannot help but be brought down by it on some level. No one goes, gee, the world's more fucked up than I ever imagined possible. Yay! It has to bring you down if you're human, if you're doing this, if you're paying attention, because you care about other people, because you're doing this out of love. And a lot of us, when we wake up, and you have to at some point, you feel, how many here, we'll show of hands, how many of you have felt angry at some point as a result of paying attention? How many of you felt sad or depressed? You see the potential of humanity squandered by this phenomenon of modern bureaucratic government. How many of you have been afraid? Okay, good. Maybe not as many hands in this room, obviously. But you understand, for the first time, maybe you start paying attention, you're afraid of the things you're supposed to be. When you realize you're more than 50 times likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist, that's pretty scary. How conditioned is the average American to be afraid of statism? To be afraid of terrorism by the state. They have that fear built in. We're all subject to the propaganda. And then just take the blinders off and you go, wait a second. I'm 50 times more likely to be killed by a cop than a terrorist? So as a